When we send these offenders to prison, they don't get detox or rehabilitation. In fact, studies show they are more traumatized by these harsh conditions in prison, and they will come out, 85% of them, they're still going to need detox and rehabilitation. So why are we continuing to waste taxpayer dollars and lives? When this act goes into full effect in all 3 counties, it will reduce the prison population to about half. Instead of taxpayers spending $36,000 per year on prison, we would spend far less than that, approximately $12,000, saving $27,000 for each person. Think of what we could do with those savings. We could have detox and rehab centers close to where the offenders live. Medical doctors have told us for 60 years, stop treating drug abuse as a criminal issue. It is a medical issue. This comprehensive act is the foundation for systemic change so desperately needed in Delaware. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of this workshop.
Thank you, Ed. At this time, we're going to have 2 testimonies. One is going to be from Reverend Ty Johnson and the other from Ken Abrams. Would you both please come to the stage, please? They'll have about 2 to 3 minutes each.
Boy, what kind? That's unfair. Good morning. Good morning. We greet you in the precious name of our Lord and Savior Jesus, who is the Christ, who is the reason I'm here today. And I want to thank, by round of applause, Representative Potter for having the courage to get this done. Similar to you for standing by his side, State Rep J.J. Johnson. I see multiple folks here, Pastor and President of Newcastle County, Christopher Bullock, also the county executives here. And the reason I say that is because these are folks who have been on the cutting edge. They did not just start this. I thank Representative Potter for just seeing it, hearing it, and picking up on what we need to happen here. Listen, in one of my visits, and Pastor Bullock, thank you, because I remember when we created and you started the Justice Department's inquiry on the medical effects and lack of medical treatment in our prisons. And we needed the Justice Department to come here. Thank God we're on the front end and we don't have to call the Justice Department in here for us to get this act passed. Amen? This is something we got to do. Listen, on one of my trips to Smyrna, all right, I was talking with one of the guards and I said, why are so many people here with mental illness? And why are so many people graying out and aging out? I'll say this right quick, and we're not doing anything about it. Is that Drew in the back? Drew, God bless you. Drew was a part of that, Reverend. Did you know that? Yeah, she got it started and forced me to get the bishops to sign the letters and all that. God bless you, Drew. Thank you. So I walked around, and if y'all see this little nick, it's because I don't get up Saturday morning at 7 o'clock. And I was trying to shave, which I don't really do a whole lot of, and almost cut my head off. I said, that's going to leave a scar. So I thank you all for that. Listen, and the interesting thing to me is when I was down there, Pastor, is there was a guy who remained nameless. And this guy was a 2-time felon, 2-time headed toward the habitual. And he was a drug addict. He stole someone's coat because he was cold. And he didn't steal it for drugs, he was cold. But because of the offense, right, and the cost of the coat, this man is now serving life in prison. I said, hello? Life in prison behind a coat for a person who's cold and drug addicted? It just didn't make sense to me. When I go over to Howard R. Young Prison, and I talk with Phil Morgan, and I talk with Ann, who does a wonderful job, and I walk through and I look at the folks that are there in what we call the detentionist population. 97% of the folks that are there because they either sold drugs or did drugs. 90-some% of them are coming back home. We don't get them treatment before they get there, when they get there, and we don't set it up so that they can get treatment at home and they won't return there. This has got to stop. Thank you for this act. Thank you for this act. Thank the governor for doing what we encouraged him to do. But it's not enough. When you talk about the IADAT program and you talk about how the 5 cabinet secretaries came together, listen to this. We know that if a person comes out of prison, right, and they actually have a place to live within a 48-hour window, right, the chances are they don't recidivate because they got a safe place. They have connected with some faith-based institutions or some spiritual centers, so they don't go back. How come we're not looking at institutions in the community that become, Marion Ellman Wright said, we need safe houses that folks can go to and grow to so that the thinking is changed and the behaviors ultimately change. In my opinion, and I'm not a rocket scientist, I got 30 seconds and I'm gone, I promise. In my opinion, when the cabinet secretary sat down and found out that folks who had a drug record, right, coming from prison, could not live in public housing with their own family member, right, they should have moved immediately because they were talking. The housing secretary was talking with DHS, Rita Lansgraf, and those folks were talking to some other folks. But the piece they missed, and thank God, I think we got a permission to do that now in some cases, but they're not looking at the economic piece. How do we link with the Department of Labor to get them some training and get them some income, because there's no income in the community that supports them? Am I making sense here?
Yes. Yes.
It worked for me. This is the last testimony. Pastor Bullock heard about me. The Lord delivered me 23 years ago. The help of Miss Betsy over there, the deacon. They saw me out there. They saw me come off drugs. They saw me put down the coke, put down the smokes. They saw me with some other stuff, but they trusted me. 8th Street Baptist deployed me back into the streets and said, you do the outreach. Now, all of a sudden, there's responsibility and accountability. But there's a support network like unmatched. Why is it so hard to get that done inside the prison? It's not hard. I love you all. If you need me, I'll be there.
Thank you, Ty. And what we're talking about with this Crime Prevention and Rehabilitation Act is non-violent people. We're not talking about felons and all that, so we just want to be clear. Ken, come on up. Ken's all the way from Dover. We got support throughout the state. So Ken, come on up. And
good morning, thank you. I was told 10 minutes, I'm going to try and stick to it. I'm sure you'll raise your hand. I'm talking too much. I give you 12. My name is Ken Abraham. I thought I was retired. These days I'm the president of a nonprofit I started about 6 months ago, Citizens for Criminal Justice. Raise as much hell about the criminal justice system as legally possible, because somebody has got to. If you all had seen and know what I've seen and learned over the last 7 years, every single one of you would be in front of Legislative Hall with a megaphone and banners. Okay, well, we're not here to talk about that. I grew up in Dover. I was blessed with a very successful law practice for about 10 years. Clerked for the Supreme Court first year out. Then I was a prosecutor for 4.5 years, Deputy Attorney General, when the system worked well. You see, I remember when the system worked well, and by that I mean justice usually was the result. Not anymore. It's a train wreck. Now, then I opened my private practice, enjoyed that for about 4.5, 5 years. Then I left the law and moved to Florida and went into business. However, in addition to having the legal experience, the world's best parents, the world's most wonderful childhood, proper upbringing, all the right standards and values, morals, and doing everything right, I'm a drug-crazed convicted felon. It's with no small degree of shame, remorse, and embarrassment I tell you that I lost everything. I do mean everything, except the white DOC costume that I walked out of prison with in February 2 years ago. Lost everything to cocaine. That was 7 years ago. You can't pay me enough to touch that poison today, and I'm bouncing back. Thank you. I was kept unlawfully in prison for 4 years due solely to the criminal, malicious, outrageous, retaliatory action of some COs, primarily to shut me up. Well, I'm out now where I can communicate. Thank you, Lord. If you want to know more about any of this, I'll be glad to spend an hour or two with you, believe me. Let me say, you don't want to get me started on the prison, but Commissioner Coop, I've had the opportunity to meet Commissioner Coop. I see him about once a month. I keep my face in front of these people so they know I'm not going anywhere. And he's definitely the right man for the job. He's on the right track. But we're here to talk about this, so God bless him. But he's got a mountain to move. I'm telling you, it's a culture of cover-up and disaster. I can give you plenty of details. They're all going to be in the book. We're here to talk about the act. Prison is no place for a drug addict. I've seen the programs, so-called programs, and they look great on paper. Let me tell you, I'm the beneficiary of a fantastic program. I'm so smart I had 2 disasters with cocaine. First one was 90 or 91 when I was a working maniac. It cost me my family. When I lost daily contact with my little boy, who was 1, I fell apart, tried to bury the pain under a mountain of cocaine. Wasted a fortune, did all kinds of stupid things. But thank God, I walked into a great treatment program in Orlando, Florida. And after that, I learned a whole lot about addiction and counseling and related behavioral problems and treatment, wondering, how did this happen to me? Well, since then, I've learned more since I've undertaken what I'm doing now. And I saw these programs when I got to Delaware DOC. They look great on paper. They're not working. What goes, I'll name one, the Crest. That was the first one I saw. I read the papers. It looked great. I said, wow, this ought to work, help a lot of people. What goes on in there is the difference between night and day. Nothing like what's written on paper. Company writes this up, gets the grant for whatever, gets the contract for millions of dollars, comes in there, and I'm telling you, it's a disaster. It's just a disaster. The inmates don't read any of that stuff. They go to the classes because they have to. They sit there, they say something or other. They take the test, one-time test, they pass out, they get the degree, okay, you completed the program. I mean, give me a break, come on. I'm telling you, I have seen it. This act diverts people from prison. Liz asked me to say a few things about reentry. I went through reentry. I was a beneficiary of IADAPT, and thank God for IADAPT. It helped me, but there is so much more to do. There's such an enormous need for help with reentry. People trying to transition out, for the ones who want to improve their lives. We're not talking about the maniac who might never get his head right, but the people, and there are many, who want to improve their lives. That's why I started the church reentry program through Citizens for Criminal Justice. We're just getting warmed up. But there's a lot more to be done. The beauty of this act is it keeps people from reentry. They don't go to prison in the first place. Some in there, if you read the thing, will be eligible to come out and participate, be transitioned into these treatment and rehabilitation centers. But most people, God willing, if when this gets enacted, will go there in the first place instead of to prison. I don't need to imagine what it's like to be in an isolation cell. And I don't need to rely on reports about the so-called medical care or anything else. I was there. Day in, day out, talked to everybody in sight. Because when they did to me what they do to too many people, I decided early on in my little adventure that I was going to spread the word. Okay, some of you, so there's a massive need for reentry, and this act does it. And again, we're talking about non-violent drug offenders. I read every word of this. I stumbled into it when I read a letter to the editor that has Liz Allen had in the News Journal, called her up about 2 months ago. The rest is history. I think it was when Tom Gordon asked me, have you read it? What do you think of it? And I said, in my humble opinion, yes, I've read it, and I have a lot of experience in all of this stuff. I'm telling you, from A to Z, it's the best thing that could happen to Delaware in the near future. It really is. And since then, I'm bombarded with all kinds of articles and information for people who know what I'm doing. I read the article about the isolation reforms in New York. I read the article about Governor Cuomo stepping up education. Education greatly reduces recidivism, too. You know, the governor has a program about prevention. I went to one of those conferences. It's the old story. Come on, you learned as a 9-year-old, 8-year-old, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. We need to put some rehabilitation in the system and some prevention, education, vocational training, all this kind of stuff. Greatly reduces the chances that people are going to come out and return to a life of crime. It's costing us a fortune to warehouse them and do what we've been doing for decades. for decades, and it isn't working. We passed all these laws to get tough on crime. We got stupid on crime. You know, hindsight's great. I was able to see, because I had the first case in the state with a mandatory minimum, that they were going to be trouble. And that's what I told my friends who are now high and mighty positions, and they said, oh no, we need to get tough on crime. But now they realize we need to change those laws. And let me just throw this out. Since 2009, 23 states have modified the drug penalties or drug clarifications. 23. 22 states have made modifications to mandatory minimum sentences. You talk to any judge, and I'll bet you they're not for mandatory minimums or these habitual statutes. You know, the problem is community, city, state, county, and federal, but it's individuals. It's people whose lives are getting ruined. It's so bad that the United States Attorney General and the Secretary of Education say it's doing more harm than good. The system is harming our communities. I'm now a member of LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and they point out the war on drugs is bad. Excuse me, drugs are bad. The war on drugs is worse. And the criminalization, the way we've been handling it, actually creates crime, and it does. It causes harm to our community. There's a much better solution. I won't get into all that. But let me suggest to you politicians who want to sound tough on crime, now is your chance to get smart on crime and take a leadership position. Don't just go with the flow. Implement these reforms that are so clearly needed. You know, we have a long history in this country of doing the wrong thing in some areas, like slavery, for God knows how long. We had segregation for 100 years. It wasn't until 1920 that women could vote. The war on drugs has been going on for 40 plus years, and it's clearly the most cataclysmically failed, costly policy in American history. It's a disaster. And this bill doesn't solve all the problems, but it goes a long way toward addressing most of them. Well, I'm getting the signal to hurry it on along. I'll be delighted to answer any questions from anybody, anytime. Thanks so much.
All right.
God bless.
Thanks so much, Tim. Liz Allen's going to come up, and we're going to bring on Mr. McDowell. Then we're going to bring the panel on and move quickly.
It is my pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Floyd McDowell, who turned 87 years young last week. He's my mentor, he's my dear friend, and he's one of the most brilliant men I have ever met. Dr. McDowell received 2 doctorate majors in education and health at the nation's top-ranked graduate programs. He has been in the leadership role of 6 national reform acts and 9 at the state level that improve the quality of life of our citizens. He now chairs the Delaware Coalition, which has 46 statewide organizations who have endorsed 3 legislative acts that he has authored. He led a research team that provided research evidence credited with winning the Philadelphia federal court decision that led to all handicapped children who resided in state institutions access to public schools and community-based residences. His early work in his native Georgia led to Georgia being the first state in the nation that gave full-day kindergarten and full-day pre-kindergarten for 4-year-olds. In his work on the Voting Rights Act, he was met 4 times by goons in sheets. I could go on and on with all the wonderful issues that Dr. McDowell has been involved in. He served in World War II and the Korean War. Dr. McDowell has spent the last 5 years of his life researching and developing the Delaware Crime Prevention and Rehabilitation Act. This act has 15 years of research backing it up, and it will stand up in a court of law should we have to go that route. So please give a big welcome to one of Delaware's greatest citizens who at his age is still working for the common good. By the way, he's got 3 more acts ready to come after this one.
At least.
Let's remember that today is the first day of the rest of our lives. Let me first give some thanks. Thanks to Representative Potter for arranging this meeting. I think it's a first. I've been living in Delaware for 41 years. I believe this is the first meeting that a governor or state legislator planned in the middle of Saturday, which is a convenient day for citizens to come and be informed. The meetings that we usually have in our civic and political culture is to tinker and proclaim, to do incremental efforts. Incrementalism means never. If there is research proven program and cost effective for a total system change, then we should get this information, understand it, and put it into operation. This bill has many components, and all of them are aligned with the mission statement of our criminal justice system as expressed in our Delaware Code of Laws. To provide treatment, rehabilitation, and restoration of offenders as useful, law-abiding citizens in our communities. This act, every component in it, is aligned with that mission statement. This is very important. Mission statements should be given on what we want to do in life and on different issues. And when you get it, you should then follow what research says. I'm talking about program and cost-effective research findings. This bill is modeled after the California Act. It's an expansion of it. The California Act, a little over 15 years ago, decided that nonviolent drug offenders should be served as a health problem and not a criminal problem. That law mandated that treatment and rehabilitation centers be established throughout the state, and that the court would give a sentence, a court-ordered sentence, for each nonviolent drug offender to be served in these centers and not put in prison or jail. 15 years of research has shown that they can serve these individuals, program and cost effective, at 10% of what it costs to put you in prison. Applying that to Delaware, we now spend $36,000 a year for each prisoner. This bill, if it just served the nonviolent drug offenders like California has demonstrated, then it would only cost $3,600, not $36,000. Think of the savings this would be to our taxpayers, but more important, we're talking about a program that would give treatment, rehabilitation, and restoration. I expanded that bill. I woke up one morning about 2 or 3 and went downstairs to make sure I recorded what I was hitting my brain. But I said, we need to do much more than just serve nonviolent drug offenders through this program. So what I put into it was abolishing these draconian mandatory minimum drug sentencing. Get it out of the way. And treat them as health problems. Then there's another part of this is it would be administered, the act and the program. First it would set up treatment centers and rehabilitation centers throughout our state, community-based. This would mean these individuals would live at home, keep a job if they've got it. And having the support of a family is the #1 reason they'll be rehabilitated. In other words, this is such common sense. Another component of this was we would set up a research center at the University of Delaware, just like they do in California, and they would continually do research on every component in this act to determine its program and cost effectiveness and make improvements wherever indicated. Another thing that's very important, a component of this act, is that once the individuals have completed their court-ordered treatment program, they would be, their records, and then they stay clean of drugs and don't commit any more crimes for 3 years, their total records of arrest and conviction would be expunged. They wouldn't have to have a felony yoke around their neck the rest of their lives. So that's another component. But let me talk about the other groups this would serve, not just nonviolent drug offenders, but if the judges now are given discretion for sentencing, which they should be given, that's very important, then they could go into the prisons and give the nonviolent people in prison now probation and release them and give them a court-ordered treatment program within these centers. They would come back and be home with their families and so forth. Another group to be served would be any human being in our state who is addicted to alcohol, illegal drugs, and also prescribed painkiller drugs. How many of us understand that more people die from legally prescribed prescription drugs than from all other illegal drugs? So this group would be a third group to be served. With the judges being given sentencing discretion, they could take other nonviolent offenders. Somebody steals a loaf of bread or gets involved in traffic or some other really minor crime. The judge could assign them to a court-ordered treatment and treat them in the community. And then the fifth group that could be served, and by the way, 97% of our prisoners are going to return to the community. Some of them don't have a home to go to. They don't have food. They're penniless. This bill would provide funds for up to a whole year for giving them economic support. Housing, food, clothing, transportation, you name it. We have, the figures fluctuate, but from 67, 70% to 80% return to prison. That means more crime is permitted, more probation violated. This means more costs, not just to the individual, but to people who are victims. So this would reduce all of this. There's no question about it. So now let me talk about the specific services that will be rendered in these treatment centers. And by the way, these treatment and rehabilitation centers will work very closely with the courts, probation, with the public safety departments in city, county, and state, and with all public and private resources that are trying to help here. It would be a beautiful orchestration where it'd be like a tributary, a river, where tributaries feed into it. That's the organizational arrangement we ought to be having, not the bureaucratic, stratified, strangulated layers where ideas go up and vetoes come down. So the specific services that would be rendered would be, first of all, keep in mind now, very important, these individuals we're talking about in all 5 of these groups would be served in their homes. And most of them, 90-some%, would have homes. But for those who don't, I just mentioned that this 1 year of economic support with job training, job placement, what have you, would be a part of it. But here are the services. First and foremost would be properly trained professional people in these centers to help them overcome their addiction and any mental or physical health problems. That is the key. But also, in these centers, we would offer they will offer family and individual counseling. They will offer job counseling, job training, job placement, and that will also mean reaching out to all the training resources that are available, and there are many of them. Also in these centers, they would receive other services that are needed to help them realize treatment, rehabilitation, and restoration. I'll just give you one example. I could give you a bunch of them, and we need to examine all of them. But let's talk about the job opportunities. I just read in the News Journal a front page article a few days ago. It said we have 1,400 abandoned houses in Wilmington. We could have these centers form a construction committee, a group made up of carpenters, painters, plumbers, electricians, and they could take, not only go out and restore these homes, which could be used by some of these men coming back who need a home, but we could help house our homeless families, children, veterans. We could do this through this program, and at the same time we could train many of these men to have jobs as apprentices or assistants to carpenters, painters, plumbers, what have you. In other words, there's another area, and then I'll finish with this. Another area would be, we're getting much older. I'm a great example of that. And we're going to have more need for nursing homes and assisted living, and for people going into homes and helping people like they're doing now. Many of these people will need to be lifted and positioned and so forth, and there'll be a lot of jobs more open for people trained to help, and nurses, aides, and so forth. So I could go into a whole lot of areas that we could train and guide individuals into jobs where they could grow in them. And then I'll finish this by saying this. This package here has a copy of the Act. I recommend that you and others that you share it with read the justifiable reasons. I think there are 25 at the beginning of the Act. And then at the end of the Act, just read the synopsis or the summary, and you'll have a good understanding of this Act. But most important, I want to give heartfelt thanks to Representative Potter, Senator Henry, and all the panelists here today, but especially to you citizens. And remember, democracy is not a spectator sport. So please share this with your family members, friends, and members of all of your organizations, especially churches. And then ask every one of them, after they become informed, don't do anything unless you're informed, but do become informed, and then ask every senator, your senator and representative, and our governor, to support this sensible research-proven act. Thank you.
Let's put a round of applause for Senator Dr. McDowell. We would like for County Executive Tom Gordon to come to the stage, along with the County President, Reverend Christopher Bullock, the Honorable Sam Guy, and we're going to have a discussion on this act.
Good morning. Let me commend Liz Allen and Ken Abrams for putting this forum together along with Charles Potter. And I'm going to speak quickly because I have a lot to say in 2 minutes. But I have a unique opportunity of being involved in policing since 75 to 96, where I was also chief of police. I also have the unique opportunity to tell you that I was one of 3 people that enacted mandatory minimums. I was chief of police, Tom Sharp, City of Wilmington. So I come at it with this is a wonderful act to begin the discussion. What you have to understand And I'm no longer believing mandatory sentences are any good. But let me tell you what will happen if you don't dig into this. You're putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the police department to stop the drug dealing, which is resulting in shooting. If they arrest somebody today and they're on the street tomorrow again, they're going to resort to serious incarceration. That's because in policing we have no other opportunities. And I think that this is a great bill, but there has to be some stuff that's specific to Delaware, specific to Wilmington. In Wilmington right now, you have a lot of young men, mostly black in the city, that don't have criminal records, and the drug lords are using them to hold a little nickel bag, then it gets increased, until they finally end up doing shootings, and they're great people to use because they don't have criminal records, they're working under the radar screen. I often thought, what if we had a nice building somewhere where we could house these kids for a half a year with good people that try to teach them and brainwash them and bring them out, where they have no stigma, no arrest. And we've got to think of solutions that are unique to Delaware, because if you don't have alternatives to incarceration, many of the minority community are pushing the arrest. When we first enacted this, it was Lake Street in Middletown. It was saying they wanted these open air markets. They wanted it done. They wanted these young men to go to jail. We arrested 80 of them. The streets were clean. But it was their kids that went to jail. And I think they all thought that was probably not a good idea. When you talk about construction, Sam Guy, Reverend and I have been talking, there are very few minorities involved in the future of the state, which is construction, the trades. They're involved in ditch digging. But you go below that canal and see those 2,000 to 3,000 homes being built. There's no blacks. And I wonder if many of them aren't in prison, many of the people that we could be using. That's an issue that we definitely have to get into, because that's something you can't export. You can't get rid of home building. It's one of the few things left in this state. We need to realize that you need to approach this from, the numbers are terrible in 19802. It's going to approach 80%. That's worse than South Africa. And it's worse. So you need to start from the perspective that that has failed. We're losing a young generation. We do need to turn these young minds into saying that the trades are a valuable way of making a future. If you don't have jobs, you can have all the re-entry programs in the whole world, they're going to fail. You can tell them how great they are, how wonderful it is that they're not incarcerated again. But at the end of the year, if they're not eating, and if they don't have a home, they're going to find a way. You have a unique opportunity with a new commissioner, whose name is Coop. He was a former state police officer. Now, he sees both sides. He has the ability to bring the police who are going to be screaming for incarceration, because their success is dependent on how quickly they can stop this. They don't have alternatives. We have to find alternatives very quickly, because we don't have a lot of time. These numbers are very critical. What we're doing with mostly black males in this state. And it's got to stop, and it's got to stop now. We don't have a lot of years to discuss this bill. So I love the opportunity to have it thrown up. I wish this room was packed with more people that could have input. But we've got to start now. I think everyone agrees that just piling these young people into prisons for 3 years, for 10 years, is not going to be the answer, and that's got to stop. But we have to get creative. There is no money for beds. There is, after they're addicted. But many of these kids aren't addicted. They're very smart entrepreneurs that are being sucked into the system by the hundreds, and they're being executed. And you're going to see a whole lot of resources in the city in the next few months going to stop it. And we're going to bring in numbers. We're going to be doing arrests, because that's our option. It's got to stop. But there is no solution right now. And we can make it. We've got the senator here. We've got the numbers on our side, which is the expense. They need more prisons right now. We've got a failed system that started with me in the 90s, and it's not worked. We housed a lot of people, ruined a lot of careers, and we still didn't end the mandatory, or we didn't end the serious crime that plagued our city. Most of it is driven, and after being a police chief for 8 years, it sounds a little bit liberal, it's jobs, jobs, jobs. There is nothing in the city There is nothing in this area. When you lost GM, Chrysler, I have a phone book that I have in my office. On every corner in the 60s and 70s, there was a business, electric hose and rubber. There is nowhere to get a job if you don't want to work at McDonald's. Drugs are a great opportunity to make $3,000 a month or a week. And if we don't start facing, you know, what is happening, sitting where I am, the governor and people begin to realize we're going to lose the entire city in one week to end corporations. So now there's attention on the problem. But the people that are paying for it, are a lot of them are sitting in this room. So I say, you know, I'm willing, Sam, Reverend Bullock, we're going to be putting some money in our budget, serious money for education programs, because the heroin problem is a lot worse than everybody in this room knows. Nobody wants to talk about it. Out there in the suburbs, it's a lot worse. We're losing kids every day. They don't wake up. And they're coming in the city to buy it, they're going back in the county and they're dying. And we're going to talk about it. The Reverend wants to fund some things. We're going to be everywhere talking about it. It's got to start here today. We're going to say this is serious. It is destroying the fabric of our counties. It's destroying the future of our minority community. And now it's destroying the finances of the state. We're number 50 in the entire country in GDP. That's the number that tells how healthy you are. We're not healthy. The city's not healthy. And the county and the state is going to die. They have to change this equation, put the money, help out, get the good people. But it has to start now, because where we're sitting, Sam and I talk about it every day. There's nothing going to turn this around if we can't make this case. So I applaud everybody for doing this today. My staff will be very much involved in helping. Thank you.